effects that having a physical health condition can have upon our brains. And at any time, we're going to start over. Hi, this is Karen Anderson with Aortic Hope, and you are here tonight with our live Q&A. We have a very special guest, Amy Wagner, who's an LCSW-C, and she specializes in EMDR and PTSD therapy, and we will talk about those details later. This is a very popular Q&A with the community because I think it addresses something that we don't often discuss, which is our mental health and well-being, and this is our big push for 2021. So the format is different than it used to be. At any time, feel free to put up comments or questions. There's also a link below where you can ask anonymous questions, and we will pose those questions for you. But first, we're going to talk about a bunch of different things, and we're just going to casually discuss as your eyebrow went up. I want you to just take a second and share with the community a little bit about yourself.
Okay. My name is Amy Wagner. I am a psychotherapist working in Maryland, close to the Baltimore area. But I have been in practice for almost 32 years. And the bulk of my practice has been in private sector work. I have been done hospital social work. I've done nonprofit, a variety of things, but the majority of what I've done has been in the whole trauma field. And what I have learned so much also through Aortic Hope and through Karen and all is really the impact of mental health that people go through following a medical event. And that I also realizing that in the medical world, maybe it does not get addressed to the extent that it should be. And I think we're all learning that. And so I really look forward to talking within this forum here about what people have experienced. I think the medical teams do an excellent job at saving your lives and doing what is necessary to do that. But then the after effects of the mental health, I think there might be a little bit addressed, like you may experience this. If you do, then follow. But I think not really realizing the extent of the impact of that. And that's where we come in to be of help. So I hope that tonight we can do that.
You hit the nail on the head, because I think what happens is whether you've had an emergency like a dissection or you've been diagnosed with an aneurysm and now you're sitting in the watch and wait category,
right,
each equally come with their stressors. And some of us have a dissection and now we're watching and waiting.
Exactly.
The physicians do what they're supposed to do. And I do think after you've had surgery, one of the things that is told to us is that we can experience the blues or a form of depression after having anesthesia that long. And they have said that men tend to experience it a little bit worse. Maybe it's because we're very emotional to begin with. I don't know. But that is, and that's all that's told to us. I mean, nobody, I don't want to say nobody, because there are a lot of hospitals with strong aortic disease centers that are bringing up social workers or psychologists into the room before the patient leaves, which in my opinion, may not be so helpful because we're so stunned and we're on so much medication. But it is important for people, I think, to learn what would be some signs that there's an issue, whether it's caregiver because they go through their own traumatic experience.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what are the signs that would tell somebody, hey, I think I have a problem emotionally. I may be fixed physically, or maybe I'm dealing with some issues, but I got this other thing going on, because I don't know that you feel it in your brain, but you might feel it somewhere else. So what can people keep their eye out for?
And I think that's important to know, because I think a lot of individuals that have come into counseling with me have waited like months and months because they thought what they were going through was still part of the whole medical recovery piece. So they weren't separating out the two. So it wasn't until later when their healing and physically and whatnot, that they realize, okay, I still have this other piece still hanging on. I'm still feeling fearful and yet sad at the same time, or scared and yet not feeling like doing anything. I just want to stay in my room where it's safe, or I really don't want to go visit anyone, or just all these just flood of thoughts. But also, it might be I just don't want to get out of bed for days upon days. And where that might have been seen as part of the recovery process, now we see, wait a minute, this has been going on too long. It's something else. So I think paying attention to, um, has your appetite stabilized? How are you sleeping at night? Are you up at night? Are you laying there trying to get to sleep, or are you sleeping too long? Um, are you having difficulty uh, being motivated to be around other people, socialize? Are you finding that you're sitting and uh, just staring off at times and hours go by? You lose track of some time. There might be crying spells that go along with it. And this may be true as well for the caretaker too, because they probably have experienced what we call secondary traumatization, just worrying constantly. Am I doing this right? Is this normal? Is it, and they're like your second brain thinking for you as well. So I think anything that is still out of the norm of how you were prior to this medical event occurring, that could be your sign that something more is going on that needs to be addressed.
And what's so important, I feel, especially for this community, and I'm sure it's applicable to many communities, is if you don't address it, it can adversely affect your body. So it could,
Absolutely.
right. So your anxiety and stress
Yes,
can go up, heart rate goes up, blood pressure goes up.
that's
Don't
correct.
feel well. If you've had surgery now, that's feeling icky. You don't want to impact your aneurysm. There's just a whole physical symptoms
Yeah,
can
we're
show.
all connected. Mind, body, spirit is all connected there, and that's all important in our healing process.
Mhm.
So, uh, where you may bring it up to your doctor, hey, I haven't been feeling myself. I've been crying a lot lately. I'm fearful. My anxiety is out off, the chart. Uh, they may say maybe you need to go see someone. But
Mhm.
I think it's important that you also, um, quote unquote, shop around, because not every therapist is trained or equipped to handle trauma in that way. So I think those are the questions when you're calling for an appointment somewhere. Ask them, what do they specialize in, um, traumatic medical events or things of that nature, so that you're getting with someone who uh, has some experience in that.
And so getting in with that, what types of therapy, what types of therapy exist? I think people who haven't gone to a therapist, I'm sure you've heard this, traditionally think you're going to sit down and someone's going to sit back and say, well, tell me, how does that make you feel? And that's not really what it is. So what are the different types of
No.
therapy that somebody can anticipate experiencing as the patient slash survivor? Because it might be a little different for caregivers. How does that conversation look? If you're nervous, you walk in the door. All we know is we're supposed to lay down on a sofa, and what do we say? That's the
Right, right.
show on TV. So what really happens?
Well, I really try to get a very detailed history of what happened, but also when I'm looking at, signs and symptoms of trauma, those are the things I'm asking about, like, how are you sleeping? Are you having triggers? Because the triggers are big target points that we want to address. Um, and that is a very true sign of trauma. And I'm not saying that it it's necessary that you're not going to work through it. Everybody who I think lives and breathes is going to experience trauma in their life to some degree. But the difference is, has it moved into post traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. So that's what I'm assessing for. Has it gone from the trauma state to the PTSD? And once you determine that, that's where you have to decide what type of work to do with them. I am a very interactive type of therapist, so I'm not going to just sit and ask, how are you feeling today? I want to start working with you, get you moving, get things processed so that we can get you back out living the best life you can. And I use several different types of trauma treatments. My biggest one probably is the EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, only because I see faster results with that to get things worked through. But aside from the normal cognitive behavioral therapies or just behavioral work, and doing a lot of like relaxation, teaching a lot of type of new coping skills related to the medical things, things of that nature.
Okay. So you've had experience now talking with aortic dissection patients, because I have no shame in saying that. I consider myself still a patient because I'll come in at some point for a tune-up. So what do you think, what have you heard would be some of the top symptoms or things that people are sharing with you that they're experiencing?
As far as triggers go, a lot of things related to sounds and smells that might set off memories. And with the memories, it's attached with the emotional things. So say, for example, you remember hearing like sirens if you went in an ambulance, or the propellers, of the helicopter if you went by medevac, or just the sounds, beeping sounds of machines in the hospital, the smell of alcohol swabs, the needles, because you may feel like you're getting blood drawn or poked, or IVs. So anything related to that, just seeing the site of the hospital, or anything of that nature, those can be what we call triggers, and they're just things that will remind you of the intensity of what you went through. And as a result, you begin to react in a physical way. And that might be, just total shutting down or withdrawing, or having a panic attack. It comes out in different ways. So the EMDR technique helps you focus on that trigger and that memory, and through the use of eye movement, we kind of unplug it out of the traumatic area of your brain and get into more where you're filing your normal memories go to help.
When we did this, you explained this in a way that there's a community member I spoke with the other day who a family member went through EMDR, albeit I believe briefly, different type, not necessarily, went through, I think, holding, and then tried a finger or wand. But just like a lot of us, especially me, after a couple times and you start really feeling the work kick in, you wean off and you go away because you're scared, because it is a lot. And I'll explain from my perspective, what that felt like. I think that when you explained it to me as your brain is a computer, and so everything you see subconsciously or consciously gets downloaded at night. Am I explaining this right? Through REM, with your eyes going back and forth. That's the download.
All five of our senses.
Right.
Gets just taken in every day through our brain and held. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then when you do your REM, it gets filed into files. But where you can get stuck with a traumatic event is that an obscure, maybe cognitively irrational emotion gets attached to it like a little virus. So then it gets put into a different file that it's not supposed to be filed in. Right. So what EMDR does And so the triggers bring that to the surface and you feel
That's
that
right.
irrational emotion, right? So what EMDR does, and we tried it both ways. I didn't love looking back and forth and forcing it because my eyes got dry. But holding a paddle, just like if you tap somebody on their shoulders, you're automatically,
Right.
your eyes move. It was easier. I was more in myself. And in that process, you are consciously performing the same download event that
That's right.
happens. And when you think about that traumatic event, now you're downloading it in a safe space, safe place,
Exactly.
office. So then you lose that virus emotion that's attached
There
itself.
you go. It's
And
beautiful.
then you're supposed to wake up in your happy place and you're like, this was great. I don't have emotion attached anymore.
Right. And that's one of the first things that a lot of people remark that they see differently is that they're sleeping differently. Because that is one of the biggest signs of trauma is difficulty sleeping. You lay there, can't fall asleep, or if you fall asleep, you don't stay asleep, so you wake up several times a night. So that's one of the areas that we first see some improvement in. But yeah, there's triggers all over the place, and I don't want people to be discouraged with going and getting help. I know that they may feel like, oh, it's another appointment I got to go to, or another doctor to see, or not. But with these techniques, we can get you up and moving faster, and improve that. So then you only need to come back as you feel like you do need that tune up or that, just check in type of thing.
I think
So,
for me, when I started, I found I was having some headaches. It could have been just moving the eye, could have been intensely anxious, thinking
yes,
that this was going to bother me, but this really didn't bother me. Actually, something obscure that I didn't even think about. Not that this is not hypnotherapy, but something that I didn't really think about that ended up bothering me, which made perfect sense when we talked about it. But the more I got into it, I got scared. So I got scared about what am I going to see now, or what am I going to think about? Am I going to cry? And it's letting out those emotions and
yes.
realizing it's not that I'm weak. I have to let the brain heal. And you've mentioned this before about crying and how important it is to the brain, the emotional part of the brain healing. Can you explain that a little bit?
Well, I think too, our tendency is to hold stuff in or avoid or repress. And just the way we're designed, crying is a way that the body just can release um, accumulated emotion or and things we have pushed down. So actually, crying, it has a therapeutic uh, what's the word I want, purpose for us.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so what happens with even EMDR, it separates the event that happened from the emotions. So eventually you'll be able to say, yeah, I had surgery or I had this or that. And it doesn't bring up the emotional thing
Mm-hmm.
with it. It
Right.
separates that out. And it also changes any negative beliefs that you had about yourself in that event too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and because that gets triggered as well, like I am too afraid, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not, well enough, narratives we play in our brain, it can change that to something more positive to live from as well.
And
Um,
the number
yeah,
one horrible, the number one worst thing you can say to yourself, or the things you can talk about, are the what ifs. And I know
uh,
there's so many people in this community, whether they're in their first year or it can be 6 years. And you'd be proud to know I don't do it that often, sometimes, but I know better than to
that's
waste
good.
my time because it's a time waster.
The
And it
what
just,
ifs or the should haves,
what ifs and
they
should
have got to
haves.
go out of your vocabulary.
No,
So
it should
that's good.
turn into what can I, let's
Yes,
schedule it. But yeah, so the what ifs are bad, but it's hard, I think, for some of us when we come out of a surgery, especially something that's emergency or something that we've scheduled and we found out there might have been a complication. When you read on your medical record and it says your name and you were without, your heart beating for so
Yeah.
long, you read heart cooled, body cooled, and you're like, that's my name. How did that happen to me? What if they didn't get the hearts? You just start this trickle down effect of,
Right. And no wonder your anxiety grows.
it's so big. And, I feel so bad, I think, for community members now in a time of COVID, because there's
Yeah.
so much exasperation on the news, and not that anything's blown out of proportion, but this can adversely affect our community members. And we're having a town hall about that next week. But now you've added another layer of anxiety.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because the whole pandemic has really caused, just by default, isolation.
Mhm.
And when you've gone through something like this, a traumatic medical event, you really need the support of others, whether it's your family or
Right.
whatever your network is. And this is really causing more anxiety and depression that I'm seeing in people.
Mhm.
And hopefully, as things start to open back up, we'll see that improving. But there's also been that fear too that I'm already compromised in a medical way, and that fear of getting COVID
Mhm.
was also, and we're trying just remain calm, but then all the thoughts just keep all of that anxiousness on the rise. So yeah, that added a whole nother layer to things.
So, wrapping up the EMDR as one type of therapy, what exactly happens after you've done your intake? What can people expect? Because I know there's a variety of different ways to do it, and what can they feel, and how many sessions do you think? Like, what happens during this process? Because I think people would be very surprised to hear when you explain what a session looks like.
What I have found and what is in the literature is that we can accomplish in one session of EMDR what it could take up to 10 sessions or more of just the traditional uh, counseling could do.
Mhm. Mhm.
Some things you just, especially if things have turned into like phobias and fears and things like that, you may not get to that in traditional ways. You've got to try some other alternatives to try to work through that, because the fears and phobias that can come up are always going to be in the way. Like, say, if you have a fear of needles, or you have a fear now of um, going to the hospital or things like that, these are things you're going to have to be doing
Mhm.
now from here on out, and just the workup to that. So we try to quickly get on that within the next session or two, begin doing that EMDR processing. We pick a target thing to start on. A lot of times it's the first thing you remember about that day you had to have the surgery or whatnot. And then we go from there. Or if you have a particular phobia you've developed over something, that is a good target to start with too, as well. What you see a lot of times is no matter what road you start on, it all ends up back at the same place too. So,
Mhm.
but it does really shorten the therapy time.
Now, what are the different ways? So, other than a finger, there's paddles. So,
There is we traditionally were taught is having someone just watch the finger back and forth. What we're trying to do is do what they call bilateral brain stimulation, going from one side of the brain to the other.
mhm.
I have the little hand pulsers that you can use. They just go beep, 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 you know. There's also light bars. You can kind of watch light going back and forth. But like I say, sometimes I don't always use a light bar, because if anyone has had any type of head issues, headaches, migraines, anything that has resulted from that,
Right.
that can just kind of increase that. So most of the time I use the hand pulsers, but we can do tapping like you're doing, the
Mhm.
on the shoulder, um, kneecaps. anything that gets you going from one side of the brain to the other, that's all you need. But I wouldn't recommend doing that at home,
No.
by yourself. After you've had a number of EMDR sessions, we can teach you a method to do at home if something rears up. But in the beginning, I don't recommend that.
And what's interesting is it's all quiet, and that's what I found so initially awkward. I'm like, nobody's talking. You just said, you just think, and I peeked, and you were watching your clock because my eyes were closed, and I thought, well, if my eyes are closed, your eyes should be closed.
Because I'm counting sets.
Yeah, and it was quiet.
It was I do have headphones you can put on and hear beeps back and forth. It just depends on, some people are more tactile stimulated, others are auditory. So we play around with that to see what works best for you. But to me, it's amazing. And I wouldn't, say that just happenstance. Part of the training that you have to go through to learn EMDR and be certified in it and all is to have it done on yourself. I mean, to a lower degree, but I've had it done, so I understand what's going on in the brain when you're undergoing that. And I've also used it a lot of times teaching clients after they've done it for a while, how to use EMDR as a relaxation technique, as a way to have visualization to help calm. So there's so many more uses for it as well than the process.
And it is. I heard about it from another community member. So of course I'm 6 years out now from my event.
Fantastic.
And then I went to speak with a neuropsychologist about some memory issues, and we had a big conversation about pump head, which is another terminology that's used in the community. And traditional pump head, according to this doctor, would be you could prove it by seeing any signs in your brain on an MRI, but it is understood that micro bubbles burst when you have a dissection, and or on the heart-lung machine, there are naturally going to be micro bubbles of oxygen in the tubing. This is the way it was explained to me. And those could have a burst in your brain. It's microscopic, but it's enough to potentially impact short-term memory, although it's been 6 years, so it's been a long-term event for me. But he did say, you need to try EMDR because a lot of the short-term memory issues are because of anxiety. It just impacts that immediate memory.
Wow, that's great.
So, and that's when I finally made the appointment to come see you. So, and I will be the first to say EMDR therapy. Most of the things Amy described, I don't know if she was specifically referring to me, but they were all my symptoms, my triggers. And, as you're talking about them, I'm thinking back in time, and it's amazing. I know how I was when I came in, and I know how I am now. And that doesn't mean that there isn't a bizarre, obscure moment when I hear something and I'm staring off into space and I realize, wait a minute, that was a trigger. That was weird. I don't know why I just reacted that way. But one of the things I will say, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, is it's important for us to advocate for ourselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And a lot of us will end up having to go to the ER because we feel things we're not used to, or we have a subsequent event, or we need to give blood, have a blood test. It could be, or it's time for a CAT scan, all of it. And I think it's very important, if you are struggling, whether you're seeing a therapist or not, to just come out and say, I'm having an issue. And
you've got to.
Right. And just say, too many people.
Especially, I've seen a lot of individuals have issues with needles afterwards, because there is so much, whether you're getting medication, they're drawing blood, you got to have another test, it requires an IV. So, and your veins are worn out too. And so sometimes trying to find a vein. So there's a lot of anxiety around the needle issue. And so I tell them, have your script that you're going to say when you go in to the ER or to the doctor's office or the lab or whatever, that you're going to just say, hey, I have this going on. this is what I need from you. This is what, and you've got to advocate for yourself, because the medical field isn't geared towards psychological, because they've been taught in a different way, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But I think they're learning.
Yes.
I think we're doing a lot of educating of them, and taking the time, especially a lot of lab techs, because they're the main ones doing all this lab work and blood and needles and stuff. They're learning.
Right.
And I think it's important that we advocate with the medical world, the doctors and all that. Hey, can you incorporate this piece into the protocol a little bit more, or that kind of thing as well, so that people are more aware? And
I'm only chuckling. I'm only laughing because I had a blood test today, and it's so funny because I walked in, and the first thing I said as I'm walking around the corner to go into LabCorp, I said, I have really tiny veins. I need the baby needle. She goes, you have the tiniest.
Excellent.
I said, I have the tiniest veins, maybe not that you've ever seen, but at the tiniest veins of right now. It's me. I'm in the chair and they're tiny. And then, sometimes I just come right out and I say, I've got PTSD, but now I tend to just say, I had open heart surgery and it was a breeze, but you stick me with a needle and I'm going to just fall out. And she's like, that's okay, honey. Do you have a preference? I said, whatever vein makes you happy makes me so happy. And I think the fear is because you can't control the potential for pain. You can't control what's about to happen. And so many community members, I think that's the basis of, it's the unknown, and it's the inability to control your environment.
That's right. That's right. Exactly.
And it's tough.
Yeah, baby needles are wonderful.
Wonderful. So when you can't control and you're feeling these things come over you, like when I used to hit the deck, when I heard the ambulance, you'd see a headless person in the car because I was down below. Or what are some of the things that people can do? We were going to talk about grounding techniques. So these are the things that you can do at home that you would recommend that people can do in their car.
Right. And
what can we do?
Grounding techniques are very simple to do. Mm-hmm. You just remember your hand, the 5. So you pick 5 things you can see, and you just, pick 5. Okay, I see the bird out there, or I see that, 5 things you can see, 4 things you can feel. Okay, I can feel my face. I can feel a cold ice cube, or so 4 things you can feel. 3 things you can hear. I can hear the clock ticking. I can hear the bird chirping. Whatever, mm-hmm. These things help you focus in, because when you're anxious and you're having a panic thing, your brain is, right. And then 2 things you can smell, and then 1 thing you can taste. Mm-hmm. And I have found, and a lot of tested this out too, having like a roll of peppermints or something like that in your purse or with you, just putting a peppermint candy in, mm-hmm. tasting that instantly kind of refocuses you onto that. It's so that's what we're trying to do, is bring you from like a level 10 down to a 5 or below, right. Trying to bring that anxiety down, that sort of thing. And these are just a simple way. So give yourself a hand, and that's your reminder of the grounding techniques. And along with just your breathing, your deep breathing, breathe in, breathe out, kind of counting as you're coming in, breathe in, count 5 seconds, let it out. Do that until, and you can, while you're doing that, be saying a calming phrase to yourself, something like that, just trying to do a relaxation technique. So those things are very helpful in the short term. Having like a set of numbers that you can say to yourself backwards or whatever, that helps you have to focus, saying the alphabet backwards, things of that nature that help just kind of refocus away from the anxiety that you're feeling. And you
Right.
can do this too, say like when you went to get your blood drawn or something today, try to take your mind off of what's happening. Do some of these techniques too that help you stay focused and calm.
Well, and it's funny that you say that because there's another community member, a member of Aortic, and what we often swap stories when we're going for our scans. I usually get an MRA, but if I have to have a CT scan, I don't know anybody that likes the sensation of the dye. It can be very anxiety provoking.
Oh yeah,
And,
yeah.
you know, sometimes I tend to rub over my eyebrow, and my husband, my family knows if I'm rubbing, I am not in a great place, and I'm trying to self-soothe it. I don't know where it started, but it just did. But in the machine, I kid you not, in my head or sometimes out loud, I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1. And,
Right.
and even if I'm in an MRI, I listen to the sound that, and I count it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's a bizarre thing.
Whatever works. Whatever
Next thing
works.
you know, you're out, or I fall
That's
asleep.
right.
One of the two things, but you go through these senses. I see trees. This is what happened 2 weeks ago when I almost burned down my kitchen. I went outside because I was so full of anxiety. My head was stinging, and I went outside and it was 42 degrees. So instantly I felt the cold. I touched the metal chair. I just got myself in the chair, both feet flat. And I looked in my backyard and I just said to myself, what do I see? I see leaves falling. I see tree. I see a squirrel. I think I can smell someone's got a fire going. And then as you're doing it, I'm slowly relaxing. Like, this is a really pretty backyard. I think I can go in now and finish cooking tonight. Just, it takes your mind, it
Right.
snaps it out. And I
That's
have to
right.
say,
And the more you practice it, it just becomes automatic.
it does. It becomes second nature. And it's
Mhm.
interesting that you just said keep the peppermint, because we are going to have a conversation in the future about aromatherapy. I believe in aromatherapy. I know
Yeah.
you've probably been to the spa as and that
Right,
chamomile and lavender just puts you right out.
That's
So
right.
peppermint would
Mhm.
just wake you right up, or menthol or anything would just snap you
Anything,
right out of it.
if
Right.
you like caramel or whatever, but it needs to be potent enough that uh, you notice it right away. That type of thing.
Right.
So
And we are going to have a link to your grounding techniques at the bottom
yes,
of this YouTube video, as well as on aortichope.org's website under resources. We will get that up for you. So we've covered grounding, we've covered CBT. I had no idea that an EMDR therapy session was the equivalent of 10 talking sessions. So that's pretty amazing.
yeah, that's the average, right?
So, and we've talked again about we have mentioned about flipping the script. And so, and you hear this, the glass isn't half full, it isn't half empty, it's refillable, all of these inspirational quotes that we try to promote. But at the end of the day, you're going to have that pity party and you're entitled. But what are some techniques or ways that we can flip the script? Because there's nothing worse than having somebody tell a member of this community, you didn't die, you'll be okay, you're getting better. It's like, we don't want to hear that. Sometimes we want someone to be like, God, that's just really must be messed up. That's got to really be bad. So how long do you stay in that world, in that space, and how do you help yourself get out of that, and why is it important?
I think a lot of it is just breaking it down into a smaller parts that you feel like you accomplish more.
Mhm.
And it's not about, oh, well, you didn't die, or yeah, I mean, you know that already, but I think it's learning to find ways to live comfortably,
Mhm.
live without the fear. And so it's just taking one day and saying, today I'm going to choose to live this way. I'm going to enjoy baking a cake that I haven't done, or just something fun that you haven't done in a while.
Mhm.
Uh, that makes you feel good and that you enjoyed pre aortic hope or pre dissection or those kinds of things. So just saying to yourself, how am I going to live today,
Right.
instead of, oh, am I just going to get through this day? And you
Mhm.
may feel that way, but I think it's all in how you phrase it. What
Mhm.
can I do to feel like I can just live today
Mhm.
and be okay with that? And not putting those high expectations on yourself so you feel like you're failing. Be realistic about what you're able to do. I mean, if all you can do is get up and get a shower and get dressed, okay, well,
Mhm.
that's it.
Right.
You accomplish that, and then you add on as you can.
And we've even said if you do nothing, that is something because there must be a reason. Your body must need you to do nothing. So,
Yeah,
while it's important to move, sometimes doing nothing is the important
it's
thing.
something.
And yeah. And if you need to just cry and say, this life is just not the life I anticipated, I'm not what I
Right.
was. We've often talked about we're now a 2.0 version, and other members will say this is the new norm, and nobody hates anything worse than that. I mean, nobody wants to be told this is your new normal. I don't think there's anything normal about this when it
Yeah,
first happens. I think it takes time to accept that this is just what it is today. Because if you had told
that's
me,
it.
and I know you'll validate this, if you had told me 6 years ago, 5 years ago, that I'd be able to speak like this freely and understanding both sides of the coin, I would never have believed anybody. I felt
Right, right.
so stuck, so stuck, and guilty, and guilty that I put other people into a traumatic experience. And so that's a good point. How do the survivors handle that guilt? And then caregivers experience guilt too, because they naturally might have a resentment, as weird as that sound, that everything's changed. What they thought their life was going to be isn't, and they can't read us, and we're not sharing how we feel, and they're so concerned about us, and we're not answering the phone when they call. Are we in a ditch? Like, it becomes real thoughts. How do we handle guilt, and how can caregivers start to help themselves as well through this process?
And I think caregivers, um, it's just normal to worry about your loved one. But I think if you can get some support or a network there that will allow everyone to start trying to get back to the life that they were living prior to, especially if somebody had to take off work for extended time to take care of you post recovery, that kind of thing, trying to get them back into their regular routine and um, and setting up some ways to check in. They will worry the first time they can't get you on the phone, but maybe there's something else they can do.
Mm-hmm.
There might be a camera that you could set up in the home to check on you, or whatever may help them feel more at ease, maybe going back to work or going away from the home. I think it's important to acknowledge, though, that there's a certain adjustment period. Your lives are different now. They are never going to be the same that they were before. You're going to try to work to get back to as normal as possible, but um, they're going to be different now.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is a period of time that I think you go through, everyone, whether you're the patient or the caretaker, of mourning the loss of that, or to adjust to the new changes,
Mm-hmm.
mourning the loss of the life you had before and how it is different now. And I think uh, you got to keep the communication flow open, talking openly about how you're feeling. Uh, a lot of times, the tendency for the caretaker is to spare the patient of their feelings because you don't want to put that on them too and make them feel guilty. But I think you want to hear it. Most of the clients I work with, they wish that their family members would talk to them more, not try to shelter them from that. And so we help try to get a dialogue going and talking about things like that. But I think just trying to have some safeguards and set up some ways that they can check on you, you can check in with them so everyone feels safe going away and doing different things. I mean, the guilt uh, is a process in itself, just trying to realize you didn't do this on purpose.
Right.
You know, you're just as shocked about how it all happened or what, and so guilt comes because you feel like you've done something wrong. Well, you haven't done it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
this is something you purposely did. So that's a more sessions of work to try to work through all the different feelings that you're having too. But
And and caregiver stuff is, it's really important. I mean, it's a never ending conversation.
absolutely.
I'm often scolded for not coming forward and sharing when I don't feel well. And I say, well, if I told you every time as a chronically ill person that I didn't feel well, you don't have enough hours in the day. So I feel as though you pick and choose the priority of when you really need someone's help, that you bring it up. And so I have to learn that there's another person involved. And if somebody
Hmm.
else is saying to me, I want you to be forthcoming, not wait until I'm wondering if you just don't love me anymore. That's extreme.
Right,
Then
right.
have to learn to respect that and know that it's okay to be forthcoming. That yeah, I've been told, and this is our home. If all I have is 10% to give, as long as I give 100% of my effort into that 10, then that's fine.
That's right.
As long as I say by 6 o'clock there'll be no dinner made tonight, that's fine. I could fend for myself, type of thing. We had to learn how to communicate about this because this is
You
serious,
absolutely do.
and
Because your life as you lived before is
different,
disrupted.
right?
And
Very
so yeah, there may not be meals together as often, or you might be sleeping more.
mm-hmm,
And even couples, their intimacy
mm-hmm,
changes.
mm-hmm.
That has to be put on hold for a little bit too as you're recovering, or you might just be very fatigued. So it's all kinds of things uh, that are adjusting. But there is hope. I like the whole aortic hope because there is hope
Mm-hmm.
that it will improve.
It ebbs and
It's not
flows,
always going to stay this
not stay.
place.
Right.
We are here to help move it to a better place.
And
So
you are now a part of Aortic Hope as a
thank you.
contributor on the private forum. So
Yes,
if you're
thank
on
you.
Facebook, and you will see this information come up on our blog because it's transferred, you will see some articles or thought provoking
Yes,
conversation points from Amy. While she may not be able to diagnose you, she can give you talking points to take to your own therapist, unless, of
right.
course, you live in Maryland and you'd like to reach out to her, you can do that. But to people in the community, just want to throw it out there. If you are on Facebook, there is a private forum that is open to all people, the Aortic Hope private forum. And we also have the, I'm slurring my words, it's getting late, Aortic Hope caregivers only private forum. So that is specifically guarded, and we screen people. So you need to be a caregiver. So it's a private place where you can feel safe and secure to express your
Great.
thoughts. I have no
Mhm.
idea what goes on in there because I'm not a caregiver. I'm not in the page. And there also is one for it's Aortic Hope grief only. And those are for individuals who have unfortunately lost a loved one or a friend to aortic disease. And we do know that those are the only two caregiver and grief Facebook pages of its type in the Facebook world. We also have support group meetings, and you've been a part of those. And
Mhm.
we've actually
Yeah,
had community members from around the globe
right. Yeah,
participate, and you will find those informations listed on our website under events, and we tweet them out. So we're everywhere. Follow us everywhere. And now Amy's going to be with us too. It's so very exciting. Um,
well,
so
thank
yeah,
you.
you definitely need your support.
Okay.
Hey, Tanya O'Connor. I think we might have a comment or question.
Mm.
So Tanya's husband has had two open heart surgeries, evidently, one in 2017, one in 2019, having some issues with patients and being startled maybe from
Okay.
behind is what I'm understanding, because I don't see the question right now. So I will speak as the survivor, and then you please take it away.
Okay. Okay.
Surgery being 2 years ago and having to go through a second is
Yeah.
very aggravating. And I've had a second surgery, not of an aortic nature, but in general, it is frustrating. I feel the anger. Isn't it funny? I feel my nose is flaring. You feel this anger of why me? You have no control. You're angry that you think things were getting better and then they're not. I think anger affects patients. I I feel as though any emotion that one is feeling is very normal. I have nothing to say about how to make it better, because I still work on that with myself as well. And depending on age and where you are, those emotions, me being my age, could be also menopausal related. So I don't know how old your husband is, and if there's a hormone adjustment, because that can be affected too through some of this process, and medications affect our moods. But that's just me speaking as another survivor. But Amy, what would you say to something like that?
Well, I definitely would recommend some counseling for him. It sounds like if he gets startled or doesn't like someone touching his shoulders or coming up from behind or whatever, that could very well be a trigger of something else that is making him feel like he doesn't want to be caught off guard or taken by surprise or something of that nature, the whole control. But just exploring that anger, because that could really be related to this whole adjustment to the life that he had before to what he has to adjust to now. There could be a lot of factors because, as you know, a lot of people are not able to return to work. And I think, especially for a man, too, a lot of their identity and where they feel good about themselves comes from their jobs. And when they're not getting that and can't go back to work, uh, it shifts how they view themselves. So that anger can be coming from so many different places. And so I really would encourage him, if he would, go and speak with someone to try to have an outlet for that.
And the interesting thing about therapy just right now in time of COVID, and you had also mentioned some people are reluctant to add another appointment, is that most therapists now, if I'm not mistaken, are willing to do a Zoom or Doxy or Teams.
Absolutely, yes.
So you don't even have to leave your home. You can go into an office, about wherever you want to go, and be comfortable.
I've become real familiar with Zoom, Skype, Google, all of the different ones, and the different things that are out there. And I'm still doing a combination of telehealth and in person. I'm still trying to figure out how to do more EMDR by telehealth, but where there's a will, there's a way. So we'll figure that out.
Thank you for that question, Tanya.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we have a question. When you are, let's say, at a doctor's appointment, and for whatever reason you find that you're getting exasperated or triggered, do you think, Amy, it would be better to just come right out and tell the doctor, whether it's before the appointment or while you're feeling this, hey, look, this is what I'm feeling? Or do you think it might be better just to try to self-soothe and calm? Because it is uncomfortable for people to just let a doctor know, hey, this is what I'm feeling. And a lot of people want to keep it to themselves. So what do you think the best way, most effective?
My first recommendation would be say something. Let them know what is going on, and they may be able to change up what they're doing that is making you feel uncomfortable. But I also, the more you keep it to yourself and try to work it out, you may not be working it out well enough, and there's that possibility of continued traumatizing yourself through that, reinforcing the fears and things of that nature. So I think, as advocating for yourself, even if you're not comfortable doing that, trying to force yourself to really say, I need to stop for a minute, or I need a timeout, and tell you that I am feeling very anxious right now, and maybe they can do something else. And it can be something as simple as bringing a warm blanket and putting on you, or
Mm-hmm.
something. I have found that those magnetic blankets or those weighted blankets have done wonders for people too, as far as calming. And I think more doctors' offices are getting that in. But definitely, my first suggestion would be learning to speak up and advocate for yourself.
I think we have a couple other questions.
Okay. Okay.
So we were just talking about this before. Can EMDR be done remotely? Because I know a couple people are having difficulties finding somebody who's willing to do it in the office, closed setting right now. And I know a friend personally who found someone, but wasn't willing to actually start the EMDR, but was willing to do all the fact gathering. And in my opinion, I thought, well, at least you're getting a really important part of this started.
Yes.
And you were mentioning headsets, so I'm wondering if that could be suggested to someone as an option.
There is, I mean, I'm still working with coming up with a creative way to do that, only because um, of the devices that we use. So I mean, there is a way, like the metronome that you use for like piano lessons or whatnot. I have thought about, I could turn that on, they can hear it back and forth. And then when I turn it off, then we know to speak. My only concern is what we call aberrations. That's if someone hits a certain spot or point in the processing that makes them react in such a way that they start panicking, or just having some type of adverse reaction. It's easier if we're in person to help work them down. But I think if they go into it knowing that there are certain concerns or precautions we need to take, and they're still willing, I think we can give it a try. I think it's just because most of us have all been trained to do it in person, but I think this time and day and the pandemic and all is moving all of us out of our comfort zones too, to try other things. So
is there a central database? Like, I know there's EMDR.com, but is there a central database where people can go to look for specialists in their area and then just start going through the list?
It's called EMDRIA.org. It is the National EMDR Association. And on there, they have listed therapists that are trained and certified in EMDR for your state, for your area.
And that's EMBRIA?
No, EMDR.
Oh, EMDR.
EMDRIA. International Association, yes.
EMDR. Okay, we'll have that link also.
Mm-hmm. And I think because otherwise, calling around and just asking, do they do EMDR? You know, that could be just frustrating in itself. Yeah. My website that we have for our practice, I have it listed that I do EMDR, but not everybody has that. But that EMDRIA may be the first place a good place to start with that.
Another question, I think.
Mm.
So 10 months post AB dissection. It's been a pretty long journey. 10 months is a nice time. Someone's getting ready to round that 1-year aortiversary, which is always a triggering event in itself, because there's a pressure. People feel, what am I going to do to celebrate? But that's separate discussion. And if someone feels that they're doing really well, however, that song comes on, that's it. It can be a song that just has you in a puddle of tears, or you're driving somewhere and next thing you know that you're spacing out, or you're recalling something is triggering it. Sounds like the perfect thing that EMDR would help with.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was thinking that
triggers.
Too.
That's
triggers.
Right. So you do EMDR to think about the event or wherever you are in the type A, type B from 10 months ago, and you download that information, get it reprocessed the right way. Those triggers should not be happening at some time.
Exactly. Okay. I think that person would be perfect for the EMDR technique, and teach you ways to deal with those triggers where they don't have that, and it's separating the emotion from the event. And believe it or not, could have you singing that song the next time you hear it, instead of, having the emotional reaction with it. So absolutely, do not ever feel like that this is just a foregone conclusion. You've got to stay in this. There is hope for healing in that.
And it's interesting, as somebody who's done it, I look back and I say, when we were teens and we're in a love affair with your crush, and then you break up and you listen to that Journey song or something, and it makes you cry, and now you're 30 years later and you hear the song and you can remember the person with fondness, or you're like, oh, I would tell my son, these are the songs that are breakup songs, what we're looking to listen to right now. But back then it really triggered you and you would cry and get upset. Now you look back and you laugh. Well, EMDR saves you decades of having to get through the pain and that memory.
Absolutely. That's a good point. Yeah.
Right. And so as somebody who, when I would smell alcohol, whether it was Windex or someone who's taking out that alcohol swab, would just go white, and I have no idea why this is happening. I can tell you, for me, it definitely changed. I used to not be able to go into a hospital with a loved one that was sick because I would hear heart machines beeping that were not in the room. And then I would start to panic because I thought I was hearing things. And then I would smell things. And I'm like, did someone drop alcohol? And my family members would say, I don't know what you're talking about. And I'd leave there and can't catch my breath. And it was visually something set me off, and I'm hearing and tasting and smelling things that didn't exist. That EMDR fixed that. That was one of the first things that went away. It just went away. And I don't even remember now what the imagery was that brought that on. I don't even know if there was a connection, and I don't really care. All I know is it stopped, and it went away. And that's not to say that I don't have nights of insomnia, or I don't, if I don't feel well one night, I'm not left sitting there thinking, I can feel my heart beating. I don't want to go to sleep. This is ridiculous. It's been 6 years. I'm fine. My blood pressure's fine. It doesn't mean that doesn't happen, but I look at that as just residual, and it doesn't impact my day-to-day functioning.
That's it. And that's the key. How much is this interfering with your day-to-day life and moving forward and that sort of thing? And it's important to, I can't say it enough, to really pay attention to the mental health piece that comes with this.
Very critical. Yeah. Very important. No need to suffer. So I'm just going to check and see. This is the last few minutes if anybody wanted to put in a question. Let me see if we have any. Okay. All right. Those are great questions. If you did not get an opportunity to submit your question or ask while we were on live, feel free to still do so in the comments, or submit them with the link below that will allow you to submit that question anonymously. And I will make sure to get those to Amy, and she will respond back. We'll get you an answer, whether it's online as a reply or anonymously. We'll try to send that answer off to you. And I do encourage you to join our support group meeting. Our upcoming meeting will be the last Wednesday of this month. The information's in the events section. You only have to sign up once and you'll be invited to all future meetings. And again, you'll see Amy's information coming across our website at aortichope.org. And there's always the different variety of Facebook pages that you can join, whichever one is applicable. But most importantly, don't forget to like and subscribe below, hitting those buttons. And Amy, thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
It's always wonderful. We really do appreciate your insight and your information. I still learn something new every time I talk to you. And I feel like tonight I'm going to go back and try to see if I can meditate or something. I don't know. I'm going to calm myself down tonight too.
Well, you're welcome.
I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate your time. Have a nice
No
evening.
problem.
Bye-bye.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.